In the 41st millennium, there is only war. But what happens when a warrior from another galaxy, a man who has already fallen, already served tyranny, already failed, arrives with the power to change everything and the knowledge that he shouldn't? The Imperium of Man had survived 10,000 years of darkness through faith, brutality, and the absolute conviction that their way was the only way. They were about to meet someone who had heard those words before, in a different empire, under a different tyrant. And this time, he would not serve. The skies above Forge World Metallica burned red as reality tore itself apart. Magos Dominus Archoi VII had witnessed many impossibilities in his 3 centuries of service to the Omnissiah. He had seen plasma reactors achieve 107% efficiency. He had watched servitors spontaneously develop rudimentary consciousness before being righteously lobotomized. He had even observed a toaster produce perfectly browned bread on the first attempt without the proper rituals. But he had never seen a man fall from the sky wrapped in lightning, trailing a wound in space itself. The impact crater was exactly 47.3 meters in diameter. The figure at its center knelt in the cooling slag, one hand planted against the ground, the other clutching at his chest as machinery wheezed and hissed beneath black armor. The air around him shimmered with heat and something else, something that made Arkoi's augmetic eyes flicker with static. "By the motive force," Arkoi whispered through his Vox grill. His accompanying Skitarii raised their radium carbines, red targeting beams painting the armored figure's form. The figure's helmet rose slowly. A black mask with a triangular grill regarded them with eyeless menace. When he spoke, his voice emerged as a mechanical rasp that somehow conveyed infinite weariness. "Where am I?" Archoi's curiosity overrode his caution, the eternal flaw of the Mechanicus. He stepped forward, mechadendrites extending like curious serpents. "You are on Metallica, Forge World of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Jewel of the Imperium of Man. You fell from the sky without ship or drop pod. Your armor bears no imperial aquila, no markings of any known forge. Your technology signature is unknown." The word emerged with reverence. Unknown technology meant only one thing to the Mechanicus: standard template construct. The figure staggered to his feet. And even the battle-hardened Skitarii tensed. He stood over 2 meters tall, his armor a seamless synthesis of black metal and integrated life support systems that hummed with power. At his belt hung a cylinder that Arkoi's sensors couldn't properly analyze. The readings shifted between weapon, tool, and religious icon. "I need to..." The figure paused, his helmet turning skyward to regard the orange-red sun. "That's not right. The star. It's all wrong." "You speak High Gothic fluently, yet claim ignorance of your location," Arkoi observed. "Curious? Heretical? Potentially valuable." He gestured to his Skitarii. "You will accompany us for examination. The Fabricator General will wish to understand your origins." The figure's hand moved to his belt, fingers closing around the mysterious cylinder. Every Skitarii weapon immediately focused on him. For a moment, tension crystallized, the precipice before violence. Then, the figure's hand fell away. His shoulders sagged with an exhaustion that seemed to transcend the physical. "Fine," he said, the word heavy with defeat. "Take me to your leader. I've done this before." As the Skitarii formed an escort around him, Archoi couldn't shake the feeling that the stranger's words carried meanings within meanings. The way he had said before suggested repetition, cycles, a weariness born not of this moment, but of 1,000 moments like it. They would take him to the Fabricator General. They would analyze his technology. They would uncover his secrets. They had no idea they had just found a saboteur who had been trained by the galaxy's greatest manipulator, hardened by decades of service to tyranny, and who had finally, catastrophically, learned to recognize the patterns of empire. The march to the Central Manufactorum began. Behind them, the wound in space slowly sealed itself. leaving only the faintest whisper of the Force, or what the Imperium called the warp, lingering in the air like a promise and a threat. The Inquisitorial transport cut through Metallica's ash-choked atmosphere like a blade through flesh. Inside its armored hold, Darth Vader sat in magnetically sealed restraints, his breathing a rhythmic counterpoint to the vessel's engine thrum. Across from him, Inquisitor Constantine Voss studied his prisoner with eyes that had gazed upon horrors that would shatter lesser minds. Voss was young for an Inquisitor, barely 60 standard years, but his face bore the lines of someone who had aged through experience rather than time. His rosette of office gleamed at his collar, the inquisitorial eye surrounded by a halo of skulls. "Your name," Voss said. Not a question. A demand. Vader's mask turned slightly, regarding the Inquisitor with that eyeless gaze. Through the Force, or this realm's twisted equivalent, he could feel the man's mind, disciplined, fanatical, utterly convinced of his righteousness. It was painfully familiar. "I have had many names," Vader replied. "Lord Vader will suffice." "Lord," Voss repeated, tasting the word. "A title that implies authority. Over what? Over whom?" He leaned forward, his augmetic eye whirring as it focused. "The Mechanicus believes you are a relic. An STC guardian, perhaps. Or a man of iron that escaped the purges. But I see something else. I see a witch." The accusation hung in the recycled air. "I am no witch," Vader said calmly. "I am a wielder of the Force. Where I come from, it is a natural energy field created by all living things. It binds the galaxy together." "Psyker abilities by another name," Voss said dismissively. "You manipulate the warp, the Imperium, the realm of demons and chaos." His hand moved to the bolt pistol at his hip. "Do you understand what that makes you? Unsanctioned psykers are abominations. They are vulnerabilities through which the ruinous powers pour into our reality. They are—" Vader's hand rose fractionally. Voss's words choked off as invisible fingers closed around his throat. His own hands flew to his neck, clawing at nothing. The two accompanying stormtroopers, not the white-armored soldiers of Vader's empire, but the Inquisition's own elite Tempestus scions, raised their hotshot lasguns. "I have been threatened by experts," Vader said quietly, holding Voss suspended between life and death. "By a Sith Lord who commanded galaxies, by Jedi Masters who could see the future, by rebels who had nothing left to lose." He held the pressure for another moment, then released it. "Your threats are adequate, but unoriginal." Voss collapsed back into his seat, gasping. His hand remained on his bolt pistol, but he didn't draw it. His eyes, however, burned with a mixture of fury and fascination that Vader recognized, the look of a zealot who had found a worthy challenge to their faith. "You just assaulted an Inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus," Voss rasped. "The penalty is death. Immediate. Absolute." "Then execute me," Vader said. There was no defiance in his tone, only weariness. "I have worn the chains of service before. I have been the weapon of tyrants. I have slaughtered in the name of order." His helmet tilted slightly. "If death is what awaits me here, it would be a mercy compared to serving another empire built on fear." The words clearly struck Voss differently than Vader intended. The Inquisitor's expression shifted from rage to intense curiosity. "You speak as though you regret your service," Voss said slowly, "as though you understand the weight of duty." He gestured to the scions, who lowered their weapons fractionally. "The Imperium is not a tyranny, stranger. It is mankind's only hope for survival in a hostile universe. Every harsh decision, every necessary purge, every world sacrificed, these are not cruelties. They are calculations, the mathematics of survival." Vader had heard this speech before. Different words, same meaning. Palpatine had whispered similar justifications while the Empire crushed world after world beneath its boot. "I understand more than you know," Vader said. Voss studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that would reshape the fate of worlds. "You will not be executed," the Inquisitor declared. "Not yet. You will be taken to Terra, to Holy Terra itself, birthplace of humanity. There, you will be examined by the greatest minds of the Imperium. If you are truly what you claim, a warrior from beyond our stars, then perhaps the Emperor himself will judge your worth." He leaned forward. "And if you possess even a fraction of the power you just demonstrated, Lord Vader, the Imperium has uses for you." There it was, the offer. Service in exchange for life. Vader had accepted this bargain once before, on a surgical table, screaming his grief into a mask. Through the viewport, Metallica fell away beneath them, its forges burning like a vision of hell. "I accept," Vader said, sealing his fate. The Inquisitor smiled. It was not a kind expression. Terra, throne world, cradle of humanity. Hive upon ancient hive, built over millennia until the original surface was buried beneath kilometers of civilization. The sky was a permanent twilight of pollution and orbital traffic. Billions lived and died without ever seeing natural sunlight. Vader found it horrifyingly beautiful. The Inquisitorial shuttle descended through layers of security that would have impressed even the Imperial Palace on Coruscant. Void shields, weapon platforms, orbital defense stations bristling with enough firepower to crack planets. And everywhere, the psychic pressure of faith, trillions of souls crying out to a god emperor who sat upon a golden throne. That pressure intensified as they approached the Imperial Palace. Vader felt it through the Force like heat against his skin. Something vast dwelled here. Something that had once been human but had evolved or degraded into something else entirely. The presence was simultaneously magnificent and terrible. A psychic beacon burning so bright it lit the warp itself. The Emperor of Mankind. They led Vader through corridors wider than starship landing bays, past frescoes depicting 10,000 years of warfare. His escort had grown. Inquisitor Voss, a full squad of Tempestus Scions, and 2 towering Adeptus Custodes in golden armor who moved with the fluid grace of apex predators. "The Custodian Guard," Voss explained, gesturing to the golden giants. "The Emperor's own bodyguard. 10,000 of the finest warriors humanity has ever produced, each worth 100 space marines." He glanced at Vader. "They are psykers in their own right. They can sense corruption. If you harbor any taint of chaos, they will know, and they will end you before you draw another breath." Vader said nothing. He could feel their scrutiny, psychic senses probing at his defenses. What they found, the darkness, the guilt, the ocean of blood on his hands, made them tense. But they also sensed something else. Discipline, control, and perhaps most importantly, genuine self-hatred. A man who hated himself could not fully love chaos, which demanded absolute ego. They entered the Sanctum Imperialis. The chamber was impossibly vast, its ceiling lost in shadows that defied the massive braziers burning along the walls. And at its heart, elevated on a massive throne that hummed with arcane technology, sat the Emperor, or what remained of him. The Master of Mankind was a corpse kept animate by the most advanced life support system ever conceived. The golden throne engulfed him. Tubes and wires and psychic amplifiers sustaining what should not be sustained. But even reduced to this state, his psychic presence was overwhelming. Vader's knees buckled. He caught himself, but barely. The Force screamed around him, reacting to the Emperor's presence like iron to a magnet. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Vader felt small, diminished. He had stood before Palpatine countless times without flinching, but Palpatine's power was a candle compared to the sun that blazed before him now. "Kneel!" commanded one of the custodes. Vader did, not out of reverence, but because his legs would no longer support him under the psychic weight. And then, impossibly, something touched his mind. Who are you? The voice was not heard, but experienced. It resonated in his bones, in his circuits, in the deepest parts of his consciousness. The Emperor was speaking to him, or perhaps examining him, the way a man might examine an interesting insect. Vader tried to respond, to explain, but his thoughts felt sluggish under that terrible scrutiny. The Emperor's presence was inside his mind now, rifling through memories like files in a databank. He saw Vader's past. Anakin Skywalker, slave boy from Tatooine, Jedi Knight, hero of the Clone Wars, husband to Padme Amidala. And then, the fall. The slaughter of the Jedi Temple, the younglings, Mustafar, the suit. Decades of service to Palpatine, hunting Jedi survivors, crushing rebellions, becoming the iron fist of tyranny. And through it all, the guilt. The festering, endless guilt that no amount of rage could fully suppress. You have served darkness, yet you do not serve chaos. Curious. The pressure intensified. Vader felt as though his skull might split open. And then, unexpectedly, he felt something else. Recognition. The Emperor knew guilt. Ancient, terrible guilt on a scale that made Vader's sins look like minor errors. The Emperor had made choices, 10,000 years ago and every day since, that had damned trillions. He had built an empire on authoritarianism, xenophobia, and holy war. He had sacrificed everything, including his own humanity, for what he believed was necessity. You understand the weight. Yes, Vader gasped aloud. I understand. Then serve, as I have served, as we all must serve, for humanity's survival. The presence withdrew like a tide pulling back from shore. Vader collapsed forward, catching himself on his hands. His breathing apparatus worked frantically to compensate for the strain. Inquisitor Voss stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The Emperor has judged you, Lord Vader. His psychic will has been made manifest through the interpreters of the Adeptus Telepathica. He paused. You are declared untainted by chaos, dangerous, but potentially useful. Voss extended a hand. The Imperium offers you a choice. Serve as you did in your previous empire, lending your unique abilities to humanity's survival, or be executed as an unknown threat. Vader stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then he took it, allowing Voss to help him to his feet. I will serve, Vader said, his voice hollow even through the mechanical rasp. As they led him from the Sanctum Imperialis, past the burning braziers and the Golden Guardians, Vader felt the pattern click into place. Another empire, another tyrant, another role as the enforcer of brutal order. He had sworn never again. But here he was, again. The Force whispered around him, carrying the weight of inevitable tragedy. Or perhaps, this time, the promise of redemption through the only path left to him. Sabotage from within. The fortress monastery of the Black Templars hung in orbit above the death world of Armageddon like a cathedral of war. Vader stood at the viewport of the strike cruiser Righteous Fury, watching the massive structure grow larger as they approached. Beside him, Inquisitor Voss reviewed tactical data on a flickering data slate. Your first mission, Voss said without preamble. Traitor Cardinal Gaust has declared independence from the Administratum on the agri-world of Viridia Prime. He commands the loyalty of 3 guard regiments and has fortified the planetary capital. Intelligence suggests he may be consulting with heretical texts, possibly tainted by chaos. Vader studied the tactical display. Population, 17 million. Strategic value, moderate. Viridia Prime supplied grain to 12 neighboring systems. Defensive capabilities, significant but not insurmountable. "What are my orders?" Vader asked. "Infiltrate the capital. Assassinate Ghost. Seize any heretical materials for Inquisitorial Examination." Voss looked up, his augmetic eye whirring. "You will be accompanied by a squad of Black Templars. Consider it a test of your capabilities and your loyalty." The Black Templars. Even in the few weeks Vader had spent learning the Imperium's structure, he had heard of them. Space Marines who took the Emperor's zealotry to fanatical extremes. They suffered no alien to live, no heretic to breathe, no deviation from the Imperial creed. They reminded him of the Inquisitors who had hunted Jedi survivors after Order 66. The squad met him in the deployment bay. 5 Space Marines in black power armor trimmed with white and red, each bearing the Black Templar cross on their pauldrons. They were giants, even by the standards of enhanced warriors, over 2 meters tall in their armor. Their movements precise despite their bulk. The sergeant, identified by additional purity seals and a personal heraldry of a sword piercing a star, stepped forward. His helmet mag-locked to his belt, revealing a scarred face with eyes like chips of ice. "I am Sergeant Titus of the Black Templars, sword brother of the Armageddon Crusade," he said, his voice like grinding stone. "Inquisitor Voss speaks highly of your unique abilities. But understand this, Lord Vader. I have fought alongside the Ordo Hereticus for 3 decades. I have seen psykers burn themselves out in service to the Emperor. I have seen witches fall to chaos corruption." He stepped closer, close enough that Vader could smell the incense burning in the Marines' armor sensors. "If you falter, if you show even the slightest sign of corruption, I will personally deliver the Emperor's judgment. Are we understood?" Vader met his gaze without flinching. "Perfectly." Titus held his stare for another moment, then nodded. "Good. Prepare for deployment." The drop pod screamed through Viridia Prime's atmosphere like a meteor of divine wrath. Vader was maglocked beside the Space Marines, his armor's systems compensating for the brutal G-forces that would have liquefied an unaugmented human. The Marines prayed during the descent, battle hymns to the Emperor, promises of glorious death, oaths of vengeance, impact. The pod's doors blew outward in sequential explosions. Titus and his squad poured out with their bolters roaring, each explosive round finding traitor guardsmen with unerring accuracy. Vader followed, his lightsaber igniting with a snap hiss that cut through even the din of battle. The blue blade drew instant attention. "Sorcery!" a traitor officer screamed, raising his plasma pistol. Vader gestured, and the Force plucked the weapon from his grip, crushed it into scrap, and hurled the man backward into his own soldiers. "Advance!" Titus commanded. "For the Emperor!" They cut through Ghoust's outer defenses like a chainsword through flesh. The Black Templars were magnificent killers. Every movement was practiced precision. Every shot found its mark. Every oath shouted was a psychological weapon. Vader moved among them, his lightsaber deflecting last fire, his Force powers crushing resistance. But with every traitor guardsman he killed, Vader felt the uncomfortable weight of repetition. These weren't battle droids or alien hostiles. They were humans. Misguided, certainly. Potentially corrupted, possibly. But human. Men and women who had followed their cardinal into treason for reasons Vader didn't fully understand and hadn't been ordered to investigate. The Imperium had declared them traitors. Therefore, they died. The Imperial Palace on Coruscant had declared the Jedi traitors. Therefore, they died. The parallel made his breathing apparatus stutter. They breached the Cardinal's sanctuary at nightfall. The chamber was a grotesque parody of Imperial architecture, Aquilus defaced with 8-pointed stars, devotional texts burning in braziers, and at its center, Cardinal Ghoust himself, a bloated man in corrupted vestments, his flesh marked with fresh mutations. "Chaos taint confirmed," Titus said, raising his bolt pistol. "Purge authorized." Ghoust laughed, the sound wet and wrong. "You come to judge me. The Imperium abandons worlds to starvation, demands tithes that bleed populations dry, and calls it holy." His eyes, all 6 of them, fixed on Vader. "And you, Dark One, you reek of damnation. How many have you killed in the name of order?" The words struck deeper than Vader expected. "Too many," he said quietly. Then he raised his hand, and the Force crushed Ghaust's throat. The Cardinal died choking on his own corrupted blood, his mutations withering as his life fled. "Efficient," Titus observed, his tone approving. "The Emperor's judgment, delivered without hesitation." He retrieved a corrupted tome from Ghaust's altar, sealing it in a stasis field. "You fought well, Lord Vader. Perhaps there is hope for you yet." As they extracted via Thunderhawk, Vader stood in the troop compartment, watching Viridia Prime's capital burn. The Templars had called for orbital bombardment to cleanse any remaining corruption. 17 million people lived on this world. How many would survive the purge? And more importantly, had Ghaust been wrong? The Imperium demanded absolute obedience. Deviation was heresy. Questioning was corruption. Survival justified any atrocity. Vader had heard this doctrine before. He had lived it. He had become its avatar. Standing there, surrounded by zealous warriors who believed every word of their indoctrination, Vader made his decision. He would serve the Imperium. He would complete his missions, but this time he would not do it blindly. This time he would sabotage tyranny from within. The Hive world of Tertius Obscurus rose before the Inquisitorial cruiser like a monument to human endurance and desperation. 40 billion souls crammed into Hive spires that stretched kilometers into the polluted sky, each level a distinct stratum of society, from the opulent nobility at the peaks to the teeming, forgotten masses in the Underhive depths. Vader stood in the strategium beside Inquisitor Voss, studying the hololithic projection of Hive Primus. Red markers indicated the target zone, sub-level 847 through 923, a vertical section of the Underhive spanning 76 levels. "Jaina-stealer cult," Voss explained, his voice clinical. "Xenos infiltrators who corrupt human populations through biological infection. Intelligence suggests the infestation has spread throughout the lower levels, approximately 2 million infected." He gestured, and the display zoomed to show thermal signatures of massive tunnels beneath the Hive. "They've been breeding for decades, waiting for the Hive fleet to arrive." 2 million, Vader repeated. Through the Force, he could feel the distant pulse of life below, a seething mass of humanity, twisted but still fundamentally human. "Your solution? Orbital bombardment would risk the Hive's structural integrity. Close quarters purge is too resource-intensive." Voss tapped a control, and new markers appeared. Demolition points at key support columns. "We collapse those 76 levels. Seal them. Entomb the infected." He looked at Vader. "Total casualties, 2.3 million, accounting for uninfected civilians in the affected zones." Vader's breathing apparatus seemed louder in the sudden silence. "You're going to kill hundreds of thousands of innocents to eliminate the cult," Vader said slowly. "Acceptable losses," Voss replied without hesitation. "The alternative is allowing the cult to spread upward, potentially infecting the entire Hive. 40 billion lives secured by sacrificing 2.3 million. He met Vader's gaze. "This is the mathematics of survival, Lord Vader. Surely your own empire understood such calculations." It had. Vader had personally overseen the destruction of entire cities to root out rebel cells. He had stood on the bridge of the Executor and watched planets burn. He had told himself it was necessary. That order required sacrifice. That peace demanded blood. He had been lying to himself. "What is my role?" Vader asked, keeping his voice neutral. "You will lead the demolition team," Voss said. "Your Force abilities make you uniquely suited to navigating the Underhive. Plant the charges at these support columns, then extract before detonation." He paused. "The Adeptus Arbites will establish a cordon to prevent civilian flight from the condemned zones. No one leaves, no exceptions." Vader nodded slowly. "I understand." The descent into Tertius Obscurus's Underhive was a journey into Hell's blueprint. Each level they passed through was more desperate than the last. From the relatively ordered lower-middle hives where factory workers toiled in smog-choked manufactorums, to the lawless gang territories where imperial authority existed only in theory, to the true underhive, a sprawling darkness lit by chemical fires and bioluminescent fungi. Vader's team consisted of 2 Arbite squads, 20 enforcers in carapace armor wielding shotguns and shock mauls, and a Mechanicus demolition specialist, Tech Priest Gavor, whose servo arms carried enough explosives to level a fortress. They reached sublevel 847, the uppermost level of the condemned zone. The cordon was already in place. Hundreds of Arbites formed a wall of riot shields and suppression weapons, holding back a desperate crowd of civilians who had realized what the sudden Imperial presence meant. Men, women, children, all shouting, pleading, some trying to force their way through. "Please!" a woman screamed, clutching an infant. "We're not infected. Test us. Please. In the Emperor's name!" An Arbite's sergeant raised his shock maul threateningly. "Return to your habitation blocks. Imperial decree. This sector is under quarantine." Vader walked past the cordon, past the pleading faces, into the condemned zone. Behind him, he heard the woman's screams cut off as the Arbites drove her back with electric prods. The Force carried her terror like a physical weight. They descended through the levels, planting charges at structural weak points. Gavor worked with mechanical precision, his servo arms setting shaped explosives that would bring millions of tons of rockcrete and plasteel crashing down. Each charge was a death sentence for thousands. On sublevel 901, they encountered the cult. They came from the darkness like a nightmare of evolution gone wrong, humans twisted by Xenos genetics, their bodies sporting extra limbs, chitinous armor, elongated heads with too many eyes. Some still wore the remnants of worker coveralls or PDF uniforms. Some were children, small bodies warped into killing machines. They had been human once. "Purge them!" the Arbite sergeant commanded. The underhive erupted in violence. Shotguns roared, cutting down the charging cultists. Vader's lightsaber wove patterns of blue light, each strike precise and economical. The Force guided his movements, allowing him to predict attacks before they came. But with each cultist he killed, Vader saw the human beneath the mutation. A man whose desperation had made him vulnerable to infection. A woman who had sought belonging in a hive that treated the lower classes as expendable. Children born into horror through no choice of their own. The Emperor's mathematics didn't account for individual tragedy. They planted the final charge on sublevel 923, in a support column wider than a Venator-class Star Destroyer. Gavor activated the detonation sequence, 6 hours until the collapse. "Extraction route is clear," the Arbite sergeant reported. "We can reach the upper levels before—" An explosion rocked the tunnel behind them. Then another. The sound of collapsing rockcrete echoed through the underhive. "The cultists!" Gavor said, his mechanical voice somehow conveying alarm. "They've collapsed the ascent tunnels. They know what we've done." They were trapped in the condemned zone. 6 hours until 2 million tons of Hive City crashed down on their heads. Vader reached out through the Force, searching for alternative routes. The underhive was a labyrinth, but there were paths, maintenance shafts, ventilation tunnels, smuggler routes that the official maps didn't show. "Follow me," he commanded. They ran through darkness, the chrono counting down. 4 hours. 3. The underhive shook periodically as preliminary structural failures began. Dust rained from the ceiling. Screams echoed from deeper levels as civilians realized their doom. Vader could save his team. The Force showed him the path clearly, but as they climbed through a vertical maintenance shaft, passing viewport after viewport showing habitation blocks packed with families, Vader made a choice. "Gavor," he said, "can you delay the detonation?" The tech priest's optical sensors focused on him. "The charges are set on a closed-circuit timer. Remote deactivation is impossible without—" He paused. "Without direct interface with each charge. It would require returning to every demolition point. We have insufficient time." "Then we make time," Vader said. The Arbite sergeant stared at him. "Lord Vader, Inquisitor Voss's orders were explicit. The purge must proceed." Vader's hand moved in a gesture the sergeant couldn't see, and suddenly the man's grip on his shotgun loosened. "You will follow my orders," Vader said, his voice carrying the subtle push of Force suggestion. "I will follow your orders," the sergeant repeated, his eyes glazing slightly. They split up, racing against the chrono. Vader moved through the Underhive with Force-enhanced speed, reaching charges, using his lightsaber to carefully sever detonation circuits. Behind him, he heard the Arbites and Gavor doing the same at other points. 1 hour remaining. 30 minutes. 15. Vader reached the final charge, the primary support column on sublevel 847, with 7 minutes to spare. His lightsaber cut through the detonator housing, severing the connection. The countdown stopped at 000423. The Underhive wouldn't collapse. 2.3 million people wouldn't die today, and Inquisitor Voss would demand answers. Vader stood in the darkness, his breathing apparatus the only sound, and wondered if this was what redemption felt like. Not glory or absolution, but simply choosing differently when faced with the same evil choice. "Extraction shuttle inbound," Gavor reported over the Vox. "Lord Vader, the Inquisitor will know what we've done." "I know," Vader said. He had sabotaged his first Imperial operation. It wouldn't be the last. The psychic scream hit Vader like a physical blow. He staggered in his meditation chamber aboard the Inquisitorial cruiser, one hand shooting out to steady himself against the bulkhead. The Force, no, the Warp. He had to remember it was called the Warp here, roiled around him with unusual violence. Images flooded his mind. A woman's face, beautiful and kind, twisted in death. Small bodies in Jedi robes. Fire, Mustafar, Padme, always Padme. "No," Vader whispered, his breathing apparatus struggling to compensate for his sudden hyperventilation. "Not real. Memory. Only memory." But it could be more than memory. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was male, female, child, elder. All voices and no voice. It resonated in frequencies that shouldn't exist, carrying promises wrapped in hooks of desire. "We see you, Anakin Skywalker. We know what you lost, what you destroyed, what you would give anything to reclaim." Vader's hands clenched into fists. "Get out of my mind." "Your mind? Oh, little broken thing. We are not in your mind. We are your mind. Every doubt, every regret, every moment you wake from dreams where Padme still lives and realize anew that you killed her." The voice became almost gentle. "We are your guilt given form, your self-hatred made manifest. We are the truth you cannot escape." Through the warp's twisted currents, shapes began to materialize in Vader's meditation chamber. Not physical forms, but psychic projections that seemed more real than reality. Padme, reaching for him with accusation in her eyes. Obi-Wan, his face twisted in disappointment. The younglings, their small hands raised in futile defense. "Chaos," Vader said, recognition cutting through his panic. Inquisitor Voss had briefed him on the ruinous powers, the entities that dwelled in the warp, feeding on emotion, offering damnation disguised as salvation. "You're trying to corrupt me." "Corrupt?" The voice laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "You came to us corrupted, dear Vader. We merely offer you what you've always wanted, an end to the pain, a chance to see her again." The psychic projection of Padme stepped closer. She looked exactly as she had in his quarters on Coruscant before everything fell apart, before the lies and the fear and the dark side consumed him. "Anakin," the projection said in Padme's voice, "I've been waiting for you. In the warp, death is meaningless. Souls persist. I'm here. I've always been here. You can join me. Hold me again. We can be together, as we were meant to be." Vader's hands trembled. Every rational thought screamed that this was a lie, a manipulation, exactly the kind of temptation he had been warned about. But the longing in his chest was a physical ache. How many years had he suffered alone in his suit, trapped with his guilt and his rage? How many nights had he reached across empty beds, searching for warmth that would never return? "What would I have to do?" he heard himself ask. The projection smiled, Padme's smile, the one that had made him believe in goodness. "Serve us as you served the Emperor of your galaxy. Lend us your strength, your will, your capacity for violence." The voice shifted, became multiple voices speaking in harmony. "The Imperium uses you as a tool. We would make you a god. We would give you the power to reshape reality itself, to bring her back, truly back." Vader's breathing became labored. The suit's systems beeped warnings: elevated heart rate, dangerous stress on damaged organs, cybernetic systems struggling under psychosomatic strain. He thought of Palpatine, promising him the power to save Padme from death. That lie had cost him everything. He thought of the Jedi, promising him peace through emotional detachment. That lie had left him vulnerable to Palpatine's manipulation. He thought of the Imperium, promising him purpose through service to humanity's survival. That lie was leading him down the same path he had walked before. "Show me proof," Vader said finally. "Show me Padme's actual soul. Not a projection, not a memory. Her." The psychic forms flickered. For just a moment, Vader felt uncertainty from the warp entities, a gap in their absolute confidence. "We can show you." "No," Vader interrupted. "You can't. Because she's not there. She's gone. She died free of the Force, free of your warp. Her soul passed into whatever comes after, beyond your reach and mine." His hands slowly unclenched. "You're offering me a lie. An attractive lie, but still a lie." The projection of Padme's face twisted, becoming something monstrous, all teeth and hate and hungry darkness. "Then you will die alone," the voices hissed. "You will serve this new empire until it discards you. You will be the tool of tyrants forever, never the hero, always the executioner. And when you finally fall, there will be no one to mourn you, no one to remember that Anakin Skywalker ever existed." The psychic pressure intensified, becoming crushing weight. Vader felt his consciousness buckling under it. This was more than temptation now. This was punishment. Chaos did not accept rejection gracefully. His hand moved to his lightsaber. The weapon ignited, its blue blade casting harsh light in the meditation chamber. But what could a blade do against entities that existed in thought and emotion? The Force provided no answers. Or perhaps it did. And Vader was simply too damaged to hear them clearly in this twisted galaxy. "I've already died alone," Vader said quietly, his voice barely audible over his breathing apparatus. "I died on Mustafar. I died on the Death Star. I died every day I served Palpatine." He raised his lightsaber in a defensive stance. "If that's my fate here as well, so be it. But I will not serve chaos. I will not repeat my mistakes. Not again." The psychic assault reached a crescendo, agony lancing through his mind, memories of every failure and atrocity playing simultaneously, the voices screaming promises and threats. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Vader collapsed to one knee, his systems in emergency override. Klaxons blared in his suit. Warning icons scrolled across his internal display. He had pushed his damaged body to its limits, resisting the psychic assault. But he had resisted. The meditation chamber was empty now, silent except for his mechanical breathing. The warp's presence had withdrawn, leaving only the faintest taint of its attention. A feeling of being watched by vast, malevolent intelligences who had added him to their list of future projects. Vader deactivated his lightsaber and slowly stood. His reflection stared back from the polished bulkhead. A black-armored monster, more machine than man, defined by his service to tyranny. But perhaps, he thought, that definition could change. Perhaps a tool could choose to break itself rather than be used for evil. Perhaps sabotage was the only form of heroism left to him. The chamber's door cycled open. Inquisitor Voss stood in the corridor, his expression unreadable. "Your failure on Tertius Obscurus has been noted," Voss said coldly. "The Genestealer cult you failed to eliminate has since spread to 3 additional levels. Projections suggest complete Hive infestation within a decade." He stepped closer. "Did you truly believe I wouldn't discover your sabotage? That disabling the demolition charges would go unnoticed?" Vader said nothing. "You're fortunate that your unique abilities make you valuable," Voss continued. "But understand this. You are being watched. Every mission, every action. The Inquisition does not tolerate weakness. We do not accept mercy as an excuse for failure." His augmetic eye whirred, focusing with mechanical precision. "The next time you question your orders, Lord Vader, I will personally ensure your service ends. Permanently." The threat hung between them. "I understand," Vader said. Voss nodded curtly and turned to leave. At the threshold, he paused. "We arrive at the Damocles Gulf in 6 hours. The Tau Empire has requested negotiation. You will accompany the diplomatic delegation." A thin smile crossed his face. "Perhaps watching idealistic Xenos be crushed by reality will remind you why mercy is weakness." The door cycled shut. Vader stood alone in his meditation chamber, surrounded by the fading echoes of Chaos's temptation and the Imperium's threats. 2 forms of damnation, each offering their own flavor of hell. He had rejected one. Now he needed to undermine the other. The path forward was becoming clear, even if it led only to his own destruction. The Tau water caste envoy was young by her species standards, perhaps 30 solar years, with the blue-gray skin and calm demeanor that characterized her caste. She wore robes of deep blue adorned with subtle technological augmentations, and her eyes held an unsettling combination of intelligence and genuine idealism. Her name was Poral Shik, and she believed the Imperium could be reasoned with. Vader watched her from his position at the edge of the diplomatic chamber, a neutral space station at the border of Imperial and Tau territory called the Damocles Gulf. The chamber was a study in contrasts. The Imperium's delegation on one side, all Gothic architecture and religious iconography. The Tau on the other, all clean lines and technological elegance. Between them sat the potential for war or peace. "The greater good extends its hand in friendship," Poral Shik said, her Gothic flawless despite the difficulty her physiology had with human phonemes. "The Tau Empire recognizes that humanity has achieved remarkable things. Your species' adaptability and determination are worthy of respect. Together, we could build something unprecedented, a coalition of civilizations working toward mutual prosperity." The Imperial ambassador, Lord Admiral Quarren, was a man carved from stone and duty. His face bore the scars of 40 years of naval service, and his eyes held no warmth. "The Tau Empire," he said, each word precisely enunciated, "is a collection of Xenos filth that has illegally occupied human worlds. You speak of cooperation while your forces corrupt loyal Imperial citizens with your propaganda of the greater good." He leaned forward. "The Imperium does not negotiate with aliens. We conquer or we exterminate. There is no third option." Poral Shik's calm didn't waver, though Vader, attuned to subtle emotional currents through the Force, felt her disappointment like a physical thing. "We hoped," she said carefully, "that the Imperium might have evolved beyond such absolute thinking. The galaxy is vast. Threats like the Tyranids and Chaos respect no species boundaries. Working together—" "Silence," Quarren interrupted. This negotiation exists only to demonstrate the Imperium's mercy before we reclaim the worlds you've stolen. You have 1 hour to evacuate all Tau forces from Imperial space. After that, we will consider any Tau presence an act of war. The meeting was a formality, a piece of theater designed to demonstrate Imperial superiority before the inevitable violence. Vader had seen this play before. Different actors, same script. The Emperor had given the Separatists similar ultimatums during the Clone Wars. Inquisitor Voss stood beside Vader, his expression satisfied. "Watch closely, Lord Vader. This is how the Imperium deals with those who refuse to submit. No compromise, no weakness, absolute dominance." Poral Shik stood gracefully. "Then we have nothing more to discuss. The Tau Empire will remember this day, Lord Admiral. We will remember that we extended our hand in peace, and you answered with threat of war." She bowed formally. "May your Emperor protect you in the battles to come." As the Tau delegation began to file out, Vader felt the Force crystallize around a single moment of possibility. This was a turning point, a place where one small action could cascade into larger consequences. He made his choice. "Poral Shik," Vader said, his voice cutting through the diplomatic murmurs. Every head turned toward him. "A moment of your time, privately." The Tau envoy stopped, surprise clear on her alien features. Lord Admiral Quarren's expression darkened. "Lord Vader, the negotiations are concluded." "I said privately," Vader repeated, and there was enough edge in his tone to make even the Admiral hesitate. Voss stepped forward. "Lord Vader, what is the meaning of—" Vader's hand rose fractionally. The Inquisitor's words choked off as invisible pressure closed around his throat. Just enough to silence, not enough to truly harm. The Force held him suspended while Vader walked to where Poral Shik stood. "You need to leave," Vader said quietly, pitching his voice so only she could hear. "Not just this station. The entire Damocles Gulf. The Imperium is planning a full-scale invasion. 3 full battle fleets. 20 Space Marine chapters, millions of Imperial Guard. They've been positioning forces for months." Poral Shik's eyes widened. "You're warning me? Why?" "Because I've served an empire before," Vader said. "I've watched it crush worlds beneath its heel in the name of order. I've been the weapon that tyrants use to destroy those who refuse to submit." He released his Force grip on Voss, who gasped and staggered backward. "I won't be that weapon again." "This is treason!" Quarren roared, reaching for his sidearm. "Inquisitor Voss, arrest this!" Vader's lightsaber ignited, the blue blade humming between Quarren and himself. The Admiral froze. Around the chamber, Imperial guards raised their weapons, but none fired. The black-armored figure radiated enough threat to make even trained soldiers hesitate. "Poral Shik," Vader said, not taking his eyes off Quarren. "You have a ship?" "Yes, but—" "Get to it! Now! Tell your commanders! They have 1 week before the Imperial invasion begins. Less if they're smart." He gestured with his free hand, and the chamber's main door cycled open with a shriek of tortured metal. "Go!" The Tau envoy hesitated only a moment longer, then ran. The chamber erupted into chaos. Guards opened fire. Lasbolts and stub rounds filled the air. Vader's lightsaber became a blue arc of deflection, sending shots back at their sources. The Force guided his movements. Step left, deflect high, gesture, and 3 guards flew backward into the wall. But there were too many. A bolt round caught his shoulder armor, spinning him. Another round struck his chest plate, and alarms screamed in his suit. He was damaged, vulnerable. "Cease fire!" Voss shouted, his voice raw from the Force choke. "Take him alive! The Inquisition will extract every secret from his mind before he's executed!" Vader fought his way to an auxiliary exit, leaving a trail of stunned and injured guards. His breathing apparatus was damaged. Each breath came harder, a wheeze that his system struggled to compensate for. But he reached the corridor, sealed the door behind him with a focused application of the force that melted the locking mechanism, and ran. He had just committed the ultimate betrayal. He had warned an alien enemy of Imperial military secrets. He had attacked Imperial forces. He was a traitor to the Imperium. Good. Vader navigated the station's maintenance tunnels with force-enhanced awareness, avoiding patrols, heading for the docking bays. He needed a ship. He needed to disappear into the vast darkness of the galaxy. He needed... A figure stepped from the shadows ahead. Not human, not Tau. Something else. The Eldar wore armor of bone white and deep crimson, her features alien and beautiful in the disturbing way of her species. In her hands she held a weapon that seemed to be made of wraithbone and crystal, humming with psychic energy. "Anakin Skywalker," she said, her voice like wind through dead trees. "The Farseers have seen your path. It branches here, in this moment. Down one path, you die alone, hunted by the Imperium you betrayed. Down another." She tilted her head. "Down another, you become something unprecedented, a saboteur of tyranny, an agent of disruption in the galaxy's darkest age." "Who are you?" Vader demanded, his lightsaber still ignited. "I am Farseer Eldarath of Craftworld Ultway," she replied, "and I am offering you a chance, not alliance. We Eldar trust Mon-Ki even less than you trust us, but temporary cooperation." Her eyes gleamed. "You wish to undermine the Imperium without serving chaos. We wish to see the Imperium weakened before it can threaten our craft worlds. Our interests align." Behind Vader, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Voss's voice echoed through the station's Vox system. "Lord Vader, you have nowhere to run. Surrender now, and your death will be swift. Resist, and we will make you suffer for decades." Vader looked at the Eldar, this Xenos who should be his enemy, who was offering him exactly what he needed. A way forward that wasn't submission to tyranny or corruption by chaos. "What do you want?" he asked. "Help us sabotage an Imperial operation," Eldarath said. "Something that will save millions of lives, including human lives, from unnecessary slaughter. In return, we will hide you from the Inquisition, give you time to plan, to build, to become the force of disruption this galaxy desperately needs." It was a devil's bargain. Cooperating with Xenos was among the worst heresies in Imperial doctrine. But Vader had already crossed that line when he warned the Tau. He deactivated his lightsaber. "Tell me about this operation." Farseer Eldarath smiled, an expression that was somehow sad and hopeful simultaneously. "Come. We have much to discuss, and little time." They vanished into the station's depths together. The fallen Jedi and the alien prophet, united by necessity and the slim hope that even in the 41st millennium's darkness, tyranny could still be resisted. Behind them, Inquisitor Voss and his forces arrived at an empty corridor. Their prey escaped through paths the Imperium's augurs couldn't detect. The sabotage had truly begun. The Eldar webway was a corridor between realities, a tunnel through the warp that somehow existed outside it. Vader sat in the small craft Eldarath called a Void Runner, watching impossible geometries flow past the viewport. Psychic light in colors that shouldn't exist. Paths that curved through dimensions human minds weren't meant to perceive. It reminded him of hyperspace, but wrong. Alive in ways that made his force senses scream warnings. The webway was built by the Old Ones millions of years ago, Eldarath explained from the pilot's seat. Her hands moved across controls that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. Before humanity crawled from its caves, before even my people achieved true civilization, the Old Ones created these passages to allow safe travel through the Sea of Souls. She glanced back at him. What you call the warp. What we call the realm of chaos. Why are you helping me? Vader asked. The Inquisitor made it clear. The Imperium considers all Xenos enemies. And the Imperium is correct in this. From their perspective, Eldorath said with unsettling calm. We Eldar have no love for Mon-Ki, humanity. Your species is crude, violent, short-lived, and catastrophically short-sighted. She manipulated a control, and the Void Runner shifted through angles that made Vader's stomach lurch. But we also possess foresight. We see the branching paths of probability. And on most paths, the Imperium's current trajectory leads to disaster, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. What disaster? Vader asked. The Emperor of Mankind sits dying on his golden throne, Eldorath said. When he finally falls, and he will fall, nothing is eternal. The Astronomicon will go dark. Warp travel will become impossible. The Imperium will fragment into 1 billion isolated worlds, each falling to chaos, Xenos invasion, or simple starvation. Trillions will die. Perhaps quadrillions. She turned to face him fully, her alien eyes ancient and sad. Unless something changes. Unless the Imperium's absolute rigidity is challenged from within. Unless someone demonstrates that survival doesn't require the brutal calculus your Inquisitor preaches. Vader absorbed this. You think I can change an empire of 1 million worlds? One man? One man destroyed the Jedi Order, Eldorath replied softly. One man created the empire that ruled your galaxy. Never underestimate what a single individual can accomplish when they truly commit. She returned her attention to the controls. Besides, you won't be alone. There are others who resist. Small groups, individuals, scattered across the Imperium like embers in ash. Most burn out quickly. But with guidance, with coordination. You want me to build a resistance, Vader said. I want you to be a cancer, Eldorath corrected. Something that spreads through the Imperium's body, weakening it in strategic places, forcing it to adapt or die. Not to destroy it. That would leave humanity vulnerable to worse threats, but to sabotage its most destructive impulses. She gestured, and a hololithic display materialized between them, showing star charts. Starting with the operation I mentioned. The display focused on a system labeled Kalion. 3 planets, 2 habitable. Population markers showed 17 billion humans across both worlds. Kalion has been declared in rebellion, Eldorath explained. The planetary governor refused to meet an increased tithe demand, understandably as the previous tithe had already caused widespread famine. The Administratum declared this refusal heresy was. The Inquisition has ordered exterminatus. She looked at Vader. Do you know what that means? Total destruction, Vader said quietly. He had heard Voss mention the term. Orbital bombardment until the planet is uninhabitable. 17 billion lives, Eldorath said. To punish one man's defiance. To maintain the fiction of imperial absolute authority. She manipulated the display, showing fleet positions. The strike force consists of 2 Navy cruisers and supporting vessels. They arrive in Kalion space in 6 days. We have that long to sabotage the operation. How? Vader asked. The lead cruiser, the righteous Indignation, has a critical weakness. Eldorath pulled up technical schematics that looked disturbingly detailed. Its main reactor is an ancient design, prone to cascade failures if certain safety protocols are disabled. If we can infiltrate the ship, access the reactor control systems, and introduce specific errors, she smiled that sad Eldar smile. The ship will be forced to withdraw for emergency repairs. Without the Indignation's firepower, the fleet commander will be forced to postpone the exterminatus pending reinforcement. And in that time, Vader prompted. In that time, certain individuals we've been cultivating in the Administratum will review Kaelian's case. Evidence will emerge that the increased tithe was based on corrupt assessments. The planetary governor will be quietly exonerated. The exterminatus will be cancelled. Eldorath leaned back. 17 billion humans live. The Imperium loses nothing except its pride. And you demonstrate that tyranny can be undermined without serving chaos. It was elegant, subtle. Exactly the kind of operation that would have been beneath Palpatine's notice but could save more lives than 1,000 battlefield victories. "What's the catch?" Vader asked. "The catch," Eldorath said, "is that infiltrating an Imperial Navy cruiser is extraordinarily dangerous. Security is absolute. The crew are fanatically loyal, and every moment you spend aboard that ship, you risk detection and capture." She met his gaze. "If you're caught, the Inquisition will extract every secret from your mind before executing you in the most painful manner they can devise. I will not risk my people to rescue you." "Understood," Vader said. He had operated behind enemy lines before. During the Clone Wars, he had infiltrated separatist facilities dozens of times. "I'll need intelligence on the ship's layout, crew schedules, security protocols." "Already compiled," Eldorath said, gesturing to a data crystal that materialized from the ship's storage. "Along with forged credentials that will identify you as an Adeptus Mechanicus inspector. The tech priests maintain their own authority structure. Even Imperial Navy captains hesitate to question them directly." Vader took the crystal, studying its alien facets. "Why does this feel too easy?" "Because it is," Eldorath admitted. "I'm not telling you everything. The webway cannot show all paths, and chaos deliberately obscures certain futures. Something about this operation feels weighted, as though larger forces are watching, waiting to see what you'll do." She leaned forward. "But if you want to truly sabotage the Imperium's cruelty, if you want to prove that mercy doesn't equal weakness, then this is where you start." The Void Runner emerged. The righteous indignation hung in the void like a Gothic cathedral cast in steel and fury. Vader studied it through the viewport of the stolen Mechanicus shuttle, his breathing apparatus the only sound in the cramped cockpit. The cruiser was 5 kilometers of weaponized faith, macro cannons that could level continents, lance batteries that could pierce planetary shields, torpedo tubes loaded with warheads sufficient to crack tectonic plates. All of it pointed at Kaelian. "Shuttle Omnissiah 773, transmit your identification codes." The Vox crackled with the clipped tones of Imperial Navy authority. Vader activated the forged credentials Eldorath had provided. "This is Magos Quintus Archdeacon Vradek of Mars, conducting emergency inspection under Mechanicus Directive Omega-12. My authorization codes are transmitted. Prepare Docking Bay 3 for immediate arrival." A pause. Vader could feel the suspicion through the Force. Security officers reviewing his codes, checking against manifests, looking for any irregularity that would justify denying him entry. Then, "Codes authenticated. You are cleared for docking, Magos. The Omnissiah's blessing upon your inspection." The shuttle slid into the Indignation's cavernous docking bay, and Vader emerged into a world of regimented chaos. Crew members hurried between tasks with military precision. Servitors, lobotomized humans turned into biological robots, performed maintenance with mechanical efficiency. Everywhere the symbols of the Imperial Creed, Aquilus, purity seals, prayer strips, devotional inscriptions. It was the Empire wearing the mask of religion. A junior officer approached, his uniform pristine, his salute crisp. "Magos Vradek, I am Lieutenant Haran, assigned as your escort. Captain Veronica requests your presence on the bridge once you've completed your inspection." "That won't be necessary," Vader said, his voice modulated to match the flat, mechanical tone of tech priests he'd observed. I require immediate access to the primary reactor control systems. Directive Omega-12 supersedes normal protocol. Lieutenant Heron hesitated. Magos, the reactor systems are under high security. I'll need to confirm. Vader's hand moved subtly, and the Force pressed against Heron's mind. You will grant me access immediately. I will grant you access immediately, Heron repeated, his eyes glazing momentarily. This way, Magos. The journey through the ship's interior was a descent into mechanical hell. Each level they passed through was hotter, louder, more oppressive. Crew members moved through corridors lined with pipes that bled steam and cables that hummed with barely contained power. Prayer speakers mounted at every intersection recited endless litanies to the God Emperor. Vader felt the eyes on him. Nervous glances from crew members who saw the Mechanicus robes and feared tech priest authority. The Adeptus Mechanicus held power over all Imperial technology, and their displeasure could mean anything from equipment failure to complete system shutdown. It was the perfect disguise. They reached the reactor control chamber, a vast space dominated by a central control altar where 3 tech priests monitored scrolling data streams and performed ritual maintenance. The reactor itself was visible through armored viewports, a contained star, burning with fury sufficient to power weapons of planetary destruction. Magos Vradek to perform Directive Omega-12 inspection, Lieutenant Heron announced. The senior tech priest, identified by additional cybernetic augmentations and a higher rank designation on his robes, turned to regard Vader. His face was more metal than flesh, his eyes replaced by optical sensors that glowed with red light. I am Magos Dominus Krath, he said in binary cont overlaid with Gothic translation. I was not informed of any inspection schedule. Your credentials? Vader transmitted the forged authorization again. Krath reviewed it, his mechanical eyes flickering through data at inhuman speed. Vader prepared himself for violence. If the forgery failed, he would have seconds to eliminate the witnesses and escape before alarms brought the entire ship down on him. Krath's eyes stopped flickering. Credentials confirmed, though I find it irregular that Mars would send an inspector at this juncture. He gestured to the control altar. We are preparing for exterminatus operations. Any interference could delay the Emperor's judgment, which is precisely why the inspection is necessary, Vader replied, moving toward the control systems. Directive Omega-12 mandates verification of reactor stability before any exterminatus action. The energies released during planetary bombardment place extreme stress on power systems. A reactor failure during the operation would be unacceptable. The logic was sound enough that Krath nodded slowly. Proceed, but be swift. We reach firing position in 4 hours. Vader approached the control altar, his hands moving across interfaces that were simultaneously familiar and alien. The Imperium's technology was a bizarre fusion of advanced science and religious ritual. Every system activation required both technical input and prayer recitation. He began the sabotage. It had to be subtle, not an obvious disruption that would be immediately detected, but a cascade of small errors that would seem like natural system degradation. A safety protocol disabled here, a coolant flow slightly reduced there, a containment field threshold adjusted by fractions of a percent. Individually, each change was within acceptable parameters. Together, they would create a feedback loop that would force emergency shutdown within hours of initiating exterminatus bombardment. Magos Vradek, Krath said suddenly, your input methods are unconventional. You do not recite the proper litanies. Vader's hands stilled. Through the Force, he felt suspicion crystallizing into certainty. Krath was too experienced, too observant. He had noticed the absence of ritualized prayer, the slight variations in procedure that marked Vader as an outsider. The Martian orthodoxy follows different liturgical traditions, Vader said carefully. I have worked with Martian tech priests for 70 years, Krath replied, his tone hardening. Your accent is wrong. Your movements are wrong. His optical sensors suddenly flared bright. Your biometric signature doesn't match your credentials. You are not Magos Vradek. The other tech priests turned, their mechadendrites rising like serpents preparing to strike. Lieutenant Heron reached for his last pistol. Vader's lightsaber ignited. The blue blade hummed to life, casting harsh shadows in the reactor chamber. Vader moved with force-enhanced speed, his blade sweeping in a precise arc that severed Haran's last pistol at the barrel before the shot could fire. A gesture sent the lieutenant flying backward into a bulkhead, unconscious but alive. The tech priests reacted with surprising speed, their combat programming activating. Mechadendrites lashed out, plasma cutters, power claws, injection syringes filled with toxins. Vader's lightsaber wove patterns of defense, cutting through mechanical limbs with each stroke, but he couldn't kill them. Not yet. Their deaths would trigger immediate investigation, and the sabotage would be discovered and reversed. He needed time. Vader reached out through the Force, touching the minds of the three tech priests. Their consciousness was strange, partially organic, partially digital, existing in a hybrid state that resisted normal mental manipulation. But there were still organic components, still vulnerabilities. He pushed. The tech priests staggered, their optical sensors flickering. Vader didn't try to control them. Their augmentations resisted that level of influence. But he could confuse them, disorient them, buy himself precious seconds. He returned to the control altar, his fingers flying across interfaces. The final modifications. The last pieces of the sabotage puzzle falling into place. Intruder! Krath's Vox speaker shrieked, fighting through the Force confusion. Security to reactor control! Intruder in... Vader's hand clenched, and the Force crushed Krath's Vox speaker, silencing the alert. But the damage was done. Other systems had detected the disturbance. Alarms began to wail throughout the ship. The sabotage was complete, but now Vader was trapped. He sealed the reactor control chamber's main door with a blast of his lightsaber through the locking mechanism, buying himself minutes at most. Through the Force, he felt hundreds of crew members converging on his position. Security teams, Marines, perhaps even Space Marines if any were aboard. The viewport showed Kalian, a blue-green jewel hanging in space, unaware that 17 billion lives hung in the balance. In 4 hours, this ship's guns would speak. The planet would burn, unless Vader's sabotage held, unless the reactor failed at the critical moment, unless one man's defiance was enough. Vader looked at the sealed door, already glowing red as cutting torches began work from the other side. He looked at the control altar, its displays showing the cascading errors he had introduced. Invisible for now, but growing like a cancer in the ship's power systems. He looked at his lightsaber and made a choice. He wouldn't run, wouldn't hide. If these were his final moments, he would face them as Anakin Skywalker, not as Darth Vader. He would face them as a man who had finally, after decades of service to tyranny, chosen to stand for something. The door exploded inward in a shower of molten metal. Through the breach poured Imperial security forces, their weapons raised, their faces twisted with righteous fury. And behind them, moving with the inexorable certainty of judgment itself, came Inquisitor Constantine Voss. "Lord Vader," Voss said, his voice cold as void. "Your betrayal ends here." Vader ignited his lightsaber, its blue light reflecting in Voss's augmetic eye. "No," Vader said quietly. "Here is where it truly begins." The battle in the reactor control chamber was brutal and confined. Last fire filled the air, scorching paint from bulkheads and leaving scorch marks on the deck plating. Vader's lightsaber wove a defensive pattern, deflecting shots back at their sources. Security officers fell, screaming, clutching cauterized wounds. But more kept coming. Inquisitor Voss stood at the chamber's entrance, his bolt pistol raised but not firing. His expression was one of cold calculation. He was studying Vader's movements, looking for patterns, weaknesses, the perfect moment to strike. "You could have been great," Voss called over the weapon's fire. "The Emperor himself touched your mind, judged you worthy. You could have been the weapon that carved through the Imperium's enemies for centuries." He gestured, and the security forces ceased firing, creating a momentary pocket of silence. "Instead, you chose treason, chose Xenos over humanity, chose mercy over survival." Vader stood in the center of the chamber, his breathing apparatus working overtime to compensate for exertion and damage. His suit had taken multiple hits, nothing critical yet, but his systems were degrading. He was running out of time. "I chose," Vader said, emphasizing the word, "to not repeat my mistakes. I've been the Empire's weapon before. I know where that path leads." He deactivated his lightsaber, the gesture shocking everyone in the chamber. 17 billion people, Voss. 17 billion lives you're about to erase because one man defied a tithe demand. One man's defiance becomes 1,000, becomes 1,000,000, Voss countered. The Imperium survives through absolute authority. Any crack in that authority becomes a fracture, and fractures become collapse. He stepped forward, his bolt pistol steady. "You think your sabotage will save Kalion? Even if the Indignation suffers reactor failure, reinforcement ships will arrive within weeks. The exterminatus will proceed. All you've accomplished is delaying the inevitable and ensuring your own painful death." "Perhaps," Vader acknowledged. Behind him, the reactor hummed, and through the Force, he felt the subtle wrongness spreading through its systems. His sabotage was working. "But I've delayed it, given those 17 billion people weeks to evacuate, to plead their case, to find mercy from someone with the authority to grant it." He reignited his lightsaber. "That's more than they had this morning." Voss's expression hardened. "Kill him." "Slowly!" The security forces opened fire in a coordinated volley. Vader's blade moved, but there were too many angles, too many shooters. A last bolt caught his shoulder, spinning him. Another struck his leg servo and he staggered. A third grazed his helmet, and warning klaxons shrieked inside his suit. He was going to die here. Strangely, the realization brought peace. He had spent decades fearing death, first as a Jedi afraid of loss, then as Vader trapped in a suit that only prolonged his suffering. But now, dying to save billions he would never meet, dying to resist tyranny rather than serve it. This was a good death. Vader reached deep into the Force, preparing a final strike that would at least take Voss with him. Reality tore open. The webway portal materialized in the center of the reactor chamber, its edges crackling with psychic energy. Through it stepped Farseer Eldarath, her wraithbone armor gleaming, her hands wreathed in eldritch power. Behind her came a squad of Eldar aspect warriors, striking scorpions in green armor, moving with inhuman grace. "Xenos!" Voss screamed. "Kill them! Kill them all!" The chamber erupted into three-way chaos. Imperial forces tried to engage both Vader and the Eldar simultaneously. The striking scorpions moved like liquid death, their chainswords screaming as they carved through security officers. Eldarath's psychic blasts sent bodies flying, their minds burned out by forces they couldn't comprehend. And in the center of it all, Vader stood transfixed. She had come back for him. "Move, fool!" Eldarath's voice cut through the din. "We have seconds before they seal this chamber!" Vader didn't question, didn't hesitate. He ran toward the portal, his damaged leg servo grinding with each step. Last fire chased him. A bolt round from Voss's pistol passed so close it scorched his cloak. He dove through the webway portal and fell into impossible geometries, his consciousness struggling to process transit through a dimension his mind wasn't equipped to understand. Colors that had no names, angles that defied Euclidean logic, the sensation of moving in directions that didn't exist in three-dimensional space. Then, abruptly, he was through. Vader collapsed onto the deck of the Eldar Void Runner, his suit screaming warnings, his organic parts demanding rest his cybernetics couldn't provide. Through the viewport, he could see the webway portal closing behind them, cutting off the righteous indignation mid-pursuit. Eldorath stood over him, her expression unreadable. "You completed the sabotage?" "Yes," Vader gasped. "The reactor will fail within hours. They'll have to abort the exterminatus." "Good." Eldorath knelt beside him, her hands moving over his suit with surprising knowledge of human technology. "You're badly damaged. Your life support systems are failing." "I know," Vader said. Through the haze of pain and system alerts, he felt something else, a presence in the Force, vast and alien, watching from somewhere beyond normal space. "Why did you save me? You said you wouldn't risk your people." "I lied," Eldorath said simply. "Or rather, I withheld information. The truth is more complex." She helped him into a seated position against the bulkhead. "My farseers have seen possible futures, Lord Vader. On most paths, you die in that reactor chamber, a footnote in Imperial records, forgotten within a generation. But on certain paths, rare paths, golden paths, you survive. And on those paths, something remarkable happens." "What?" Vader asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "You become a catalyst," Eldorath said. "A symbol that resistance against tyranny is possible without falling to chaos. Others see what you've done, saving Kaelion, defying the Inquisition, choosing mercy over expediency, and they are inspired. Small acts of sabotage spread across the Imperium like wildfire. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to temper its worst excesses, enough to introduce flexibility into its rigid dogma." Her alien eyes met his. "Enough to give humanity a chance at surviving what's coming when the Emperor finally falls." Vader absorbed this. "You're gambling the fate of your entire species on me? A broken weapon from another galaxy?" "We're gambling on the principle you represent," Eldorath corrected. "That even in this darkest of millennia, individuals still have the power to choose, to resist, to sabotage the machinery of oppression from within." She stood, moving to the pilot controls. "The Imperium will hunt you now with everything they have. Voss will dedicate his life to finding you. Your name will become synonymous with heresy and betrayal." "I've been called worse," Vader said. "Indeed." Eldorath manipulated the controls, and the Void Runner began moving through the webway's impossible corridors. "I'm taking you to a place beyond Imperial reach, a hidden sanctuary where others like you gather, those who resist without serving chaos, rogue traders who smuggle refugees from purge worlds, tech priests who preserve knowledge the Mechanicus would destroy, former Inquisitors who learned too much truth, even a few Space Marines whose chapters were declared excommunicate traitorous for refusing unjust orders." "A resistance," Vader said. "A network," Eldorath replied. "Scattered, fragmented, lacking coordination, but with potential." She glanced back at him. "With your experience in insurgency, your unique abilities, your understanding of how empires think and operate, you could unite them. Give them purpose beyond mere survival." Vader thought of Kaelion, 17 billion people who would live because he had made a choice. He thought of all the other worlds facing similar fates. The billions who suffered under the Imperium's brutal calculus of survival. He thought of Padme, and what she would have wanted him to become. "I'll need information," Vader said finally. "Targets. Imperial operations that cause the most suffering with the least strategic gain. Places where sabotage will save lives without empowering chaos or Xenos threats that would destroy humanity." "We have exactly that," Eldorath said. "The Eldar have monitored the Imperium for millennia. We know where its cruelty exceeds necessity, where mercy would cost nothing but pride." She smiled that sad, ancient smile. "Welcome to the long war, Anakin Skywalker. Not the Imperium's war of conquest, not Chaos's war of corruption, but the quiet war of those who resist tyranny, one act of sabotage at a time. Through the viewport, Vader watched the webway's impossible geometries flow past. Somewhere behind them, the righteous Indignation was suffering catastrophic reactor failure, its crew scrambling to prevent meltdown, its mission to destroy Kalion aborted. One world saved, a million more in need of salvation. The mathematics seemed impossible. One man, even one with the Force, against an empire of 1,000,000 worlds, backed by the psychic will of a god emperor and 10,000 years of accumulated fanaticism. But Vader had learned something in his years of suffering. Sometimes the impossible was merely difficult. Sometimes one person's choice rippled outward in ways that changed everything. He had been Anakin Skywalker, hero of the Republic. He had been Darth Vader, enforcer of the Empire. Now, in this grim darkness of the 41st millennium, he would become something new. A saboteur of tyranny, an agent of disruption, a ghost in the Imperial machine working to introduce mercy into mathematics that acknowledged only survival. The Imperium would hunt him, chaos would tempt him. The road ahead promised only hardship, danger, and probable death. But for the first time since Mustafar, Vader felt something he had thought lost forever. Purpose that wasn't built on someone else's lies. "How long until we reach this sanctuary?" he asked. 3 days of webway travel," Eldorath replied. "Good," Vader said, closing his eyes behind his mask. "I'll need that time to repair my systems. And to plan." "Plan what?" "The next act of sabotage," Vader said. "The Imperium has 1,000,000 worlds to defend. We only need to make them question whether their cruelty is truly necessary. One world at a time, one saved life at a time." His breathing apparatus settled into its rhythmic pattern. "They think mercy is weakness. I'm going to prove them wrong." Farseer Eldorath said nothing for a long moment, her ancient eyes fixed on the broken warrior who had just declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Then she nodded, the gesture carrying weight that transcended species and time. "The Emperor protects, they say," she murmured. "But sometimes, what truly protects humanity is someone willing to sabotage the Emperor's worst impulses." The Void Runner disappeared into the webway's depths, carrying its unlikely alliance toward an uncertain future. Behind them, Kalion's sun rose over 17 billion souls, who would never know how close they had come to annihilation. Who would never know the name of the black-armored figure who had saved them. But across the Imperium, in scattered sanctuaries and hidden networks, word would spread of what had happened. Of an Imperial operation sabotaged, of an exterminatus aborted, of proof that even in the 41st millennium's darkness, resistance was possible. The sabotage had begun. And once begun, it would not stop until either the Imperium learned mercy or Anakin Skywalker finally found the death that had eluded him for so long. Either way, the galaxy would never be quite the same. In the annals of the Inquisition, the incident aboard the righteous Indignation would be recorded as a minor embarrassment, a Xenos infiltration that caused temporary reactor malfunction and the unfortunate delay of a righteous exterminatus. Lord Vader, the mysterious psyker who had briefly served the Imperium, was declared excommunicate traitoris, his existence to be purged from official records. Inquisitor Constantin Voss, however, would never forget. He dedicated the remainder of his career to hunting the black-armored heretic, following a trail of sabotaged operations and aborted atrocities across a dozen sectors. Every world that survived when it should have burned, every purge that failed when it should have succeeded, every act of mercy that appeared in an empire built on cruelty. Voss saw the pattern, and it drove him to obsession. But patterns are funny things. They spread, they inspire. In the dark corners of the Imperium, among those who still remembered that humanity once stood for more than mere survival, whispers began to circulate. Stories of a ghost who fought tyranny without serving chaos, of a saboteur who saved worlds without demanding worship or allegiance, of proof that even in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there could still be heroes. The stories were never believed, of course. The Imperium's propaganda machine ensured that. Lord Vader was declared a heretic, a traitor, a cautionary tale about the dangers of mercy. But in the underhives and the outskirts, in the places where imperial authority grew thin and human compassion still flickered like dying embers, the stories persisted. And sometimes, persistence is enough. Anakin Skywalker had fallen once in service to tyranny. In the 41st millennium, he had finally found his redemption, not through grand gestures or heroic sacrifice, but through the patient, dangerous work of sabotaging empire from within. One world at a time, one saved life at a time. It would never be enough. The Imperium's cruelty was too vast, too systematic, too embedded in its very structure. But perhaps that was never the point. Perhaps the point was simply to prove that resistance was possible, that mercy wasn't weakness, that even a fallen man could choose to stand for something. 17 billion souls on Kalion would live their lives never knowing they had been saved. But they would live. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, sometimes survival is its own form of victory. The Emperor protects, the faithful proclaimed. But sometimes, what truly protected humanity was someone willing to sabotage the Emperor's darkest commands. And in the webway's hidden paths, aboard an Eldar Void Runner piloted by an ancient prophet, Darth Vader, no, Anakin Skywalker, planned his next act of rebellion against the tyranny he had sworn never to serve again. The galaxy would burn, as it always had. But perhaps, just perhaps, it would burn a little less brightly because one broken man had finally learned to choose mercy over obedience.